your transition into the U.S. and then becoming an athlete, world level athlete who understands like commitment to something that's exceptional and very unique in sport as a pole vaulter. We share the sport of pole vaulting.
Yeah.
We do not share the same level of accomplishment. But, I think it's interesting because we were talking earlier how most of our relationship has been at wrestling tournaments in some random place. It's noisy. You got hundreds of parents and kids screaming, the whistle's blowing. And between the weight class of my son or sons and yours, that's the time we spend together.
Yeah.
We probably start a conversation. Maybe we finish one. And immediately go to the next kids on the mat. And then the summer goes by and then we go back to the next one.
That's right.
So, but it's interesting. We can pick up everywhere. And
it's funny about that too, is just the sport. Cause I didn't wrestle, you did, collegiately, it's a big deal. And then for me, big deal was having 0.0 awareness of wrestling starting high school with my son. And so, you were just a huge resource in just like what's what. So that's the first thing. But then as far as our conversations, then we would be Matt's side. And then just the sport is, whether you want to think about it poetic or however you want to think of it. But I think that has spurred a lot of our conversations is not necessarily the wrestling, but the character of the person, the vision of the referee, the vision of the athlete, how the coach interact, like all these things that are happening simultaneously would be like a phrase. And then we're off to the races with some sort of conversation.
Such a, wrestling, and I think probably most sports would be this way, and probably most music, academia, it's a microcosm of life.
Yep.
Right? The things about you have an individual and cause and effect that happen there, and whether you're good or not good is relative at various parts. And then you have, like you said, an official, well, what's the rule base? And also they've been, our sons have been in 3 different styles of wrestling, different rules in all of them. Well, wait, in this style, what's that mean? And then who reinforces the rules, their competence varies, right? And so, and then you have all those dynamics, just like in all parts of life.
Yep.
I also find it interesting in that what we have in common and what we have differences, I think relationships matter. And you usually kind of gravitate towards people whose maybe energy levels or level of similar insanity or something. It's fun. And I've appreciated too that the perspective you're able to bring. A lot of times a parent, when their child's doing something, they want to be the authority or the expert or whatever. And I noticed your resourcefulness in making sure that you wanted to make sure that your kids have the right resources in whatever they're doing. It doesn't have to be you.
Well, I'll tell you, in wrestling, it can't be.
Well, that helps, right? But it's even, so for me, I wrestled, and I brother wrestled, D1 wrestling and all that, and it was very obvious to me as kids. I started coaching their kids' club, and that was kind of necessary in Illinois. It became obvious when we're traveling all over the country that it was hard to draw that line between dad and coach.
Yeah.
And when the kid's 7, and you're driving back from Wisconsin, and it's hours away from the tournament, and you're still bringing up things, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
That's being about you. And I saw, and I'm sure you've seen this, people get overparented and said, you know what, so I found best coaches in the world, or in the country that I could, and they're a coach, and I'm dad. But I've watched that with you because you didn't from the sport. However, your profession, your occupation, knowing what you do about wellness and about the sciences of the human body, those things, you brought those strengths too. So anyway, I think it's all parallel too, that the things that you do know and that you're good at, you bring, and the things we're not, we don't have any expertise there. If a kid's hurt, that's on you. If there's a wrestling technique, I'll try to help.
Well, yeah, and I think that, a big point is roles, right? So, and this is kind of like everywhere in life, we're multiple people, like I'm going back to the clinic after this. This is my clinic suit, right?
Yeah.
So there's a role that I have that just putting on a piece of clothing for my mindset shifts me a bit. I'm still truly me, the guy who loves hard rock, the guy who, have all my other things that doesn't look very doctor-y, but I'm still me this way. Me as a dad who wants to see my kids succeed in whatever they're doing, in this case, sports, for example, where I can contribute, I want to contribute, but I also know there's my role. They will see me as their father, not their coach. In fact, my youngest right now, who's 11, we just started working out together. And I said, look, when we're at the track or in the gym or wherever we are, like, I'm your coach at that point, because otherwise he won't hear the criticism.
Right.
And it'll be taken. And to his credit, even at 10, 11 years old, he's shifted how he's heard, because I am a different person at that. I'm a different role at that point. And so it's the two ways of that thing are true. And then the blurred lines of both of those can be really ugly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, and there's people in my line of work who just wear kind of street clothes. I used to wear just, kind of like this, and then
just scrubby outfit like me.
Well, I thought, I can actually get away with wearing pajamas every day to work.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But really, it's for me, there's a distinction, and there's a lot of research on just how you're presenting yourself.
Absolutely.
A lot of consultants in the doctor world say, wear your white coat, and it's just, I don't want to wear the white coat. But
it's absolutely true. I think that one, how another person perceives you, also how you perceive yourself.
Yep.
Right. The mindset. But if you have it what you wear, yes, but also what you wear, your countenance. At least when I see you, you have a pleasant countenance. You fake it. You're in shape, right? You're in a wellness business. It's fascinating to me how many people are in health and wellness medical industry, and they don't take care of themselves. The credibility of that advice seems limited to me, and I think. But the way you feel, I would imagine when you put your scrubs on or whatever you call this.
Yep.
Like when I was young in business and I was afraid to pick up the phone and book meetings when I was 19 years old, I'd put a suit on to get on the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that, but like I've seen you in environments where we're at a noisy, loud wrestling tournament. You wear the thing that looks like supporting the Lake Travis High School.
Yep.
Or the club. Going to a nice dinner. Doing something, whatever this with the athletic programs, selling concessions, like each one of those is different context.
Yep.
And you probably, especially in your occupation, every day, probably every several minutes, you have to change context from good discussions to bad discussions and back and forth. How do you, whether it's whole life or whether it's in your business, I think a lot of people struggle with what you just mentioned. They struggle with moving from this context to this context, and maybe carry that baggage into the next one. How do you do that?
Well, I think on that, it's what's the outcome that we're looking for and whatever the situation is. So like in my world, in the clinic, literally I'm going from room to room kind of all day. And behind each door is a separate person who you could even have the same problem, let's just pretend, in 2 rooms, but what got each person there is a different story. So it's not the same path for resolution either. So just understanding what's the outcome that we're looking, and there's outcomes that I want, just kind of like we can go in parenting or business where we want a certain outcome, but who we're interacting with, we got to understand what the outcome they want is. And sometimes, like, as a coach too, like there's what needs to happen. That's to get to your want, we have to go through these parts. But at the end of the day, people want what they want. And if you overshoot that for just what they need, like the buy-in, like for my work, I'm not doing surgery on people. So that I can go in, obviously they're willing participants in that case, but there's a thing I'm going to do, and there's an outcome that's going to happen from that. In my world of stuff where there's a lot of lifestyle that comes into what we do, because it's health and wellness.
Do you want to give just a little context on what your
So
practice and your business? Yeah.
my background is I'm a doctor of chiropractic, and then I'm triple board certified as a functional neurologist. So many additional years postdoctorate in what's called functional neurology. And whenever you hear like functional medicine, functional whatever it is, it just means root centered. Means we're looking for the root cause, not just symptom treatment.
Right.
Most of medicine is about you come in with an owie and let's make your owie not be conscious to you anymore. So we don't want to just cover things up. But the functional medicine, it's all about why is that thing happening? And to get to a real resolution long term, there may be things that we have to address that don't seem so, it's not as linear a path, and this is what's different about functional medicine. And functional neurology does that with neurological conditions typically, and we're using non-pharmaceutical and non-surgical approaches to do that.
Yeah, which I have a ton of respect for. And even just as an athlete, as the data point of one, that approach to wellness and health and wellness is much more effective than any give it a drug or give it a surgery or even PT, symptom treatment. So we could probably go down a rabbit hole here that would go a long ways, but is there a line between cause and effect physically and then mentally? Because one of the things you just mentioned feels like it could be applied towards mental health as well. People treat symptoms. I'm tired, I'm depressed, I'm happy, I'm sad, and they treat that thing. How much of what you do blends from the physical to the mental, emotional states?
All of it, because I can't separate it. So if you look at here in Western culture, we start from young age, very symptom is the problem. And then you can look at some other cultures and symptom is an indicator of a problem. That means that it is the problem. So you've traveled far more than I have, but you've been to Eastern countries where as a practice, you might see people out in the park doing Tai Chi, or here we could do exercise, but we got, 80s hair metal in our band. Hey, which I'm all for, but it's a different.
Nothing quite like Guns N' Roses to get through a run.
That's right. But it's a different, that can still feed you, but there's a different thought process in other places. And, it's not like it doesn't happen here, but it's not the predominant process that goes through. So you cannot separate, in my opinion, you just can't separate. Anything that happens to a part of the body is happening to the whole of the body. I just kind of, in my mind, see if you see a still pond and you throw the stone in, you see the ripples this way. And that's like the symptoms of the stone is what you see on the surface. But there's a ripple effect below.
Yes.
And this is what has to be looked at too. And that stone's going to come to a sitting point. And so if that just stays and you never get to the pit, then you're just in this loop of the symptoms.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's you see it over and over where people would call stress, but cause and effect. I've seen that personally with like strong psychological pain, and then didn't realize that was what was causing physical issues. And I think if you talk to people who are pretty much no matter what religion, people who are spiritual, which is like a high percentage of the populace, believe in something intangible, and that intangible impacts our mind. Our mind then affects our all the physical, chemical stuff that happens in the body, and then, it's like the fact that it doesn't separate is very interesting.
Well, so on that, it's just if you have awareness that it's connected versus not, just that one thing, just that. So you have this part in the brain called the reticular activating formation, and as
we all say,
of course, RAF, or some people will call it system, reticular activating system, and so. It's the best way I can think about saying this is, let's say that you and I are having a conversation at a party, and there's conversation everywhere, but you hear Wade faintly somewhere, but we're having a full-on, focused conversation. But if you hear your name, you will attenuate to it. Mm-hmm. There's awareness that your mind's dealing with all this stuff all the time. So that you could hear it at all means that you were hearing all of it. Mm-hmm. But this part of your mind tells you what's important to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So back to like the symptom versus root is, if we can start being in a process of what's worth being aware of. Mm-hmm. So like in your world of, as you are sitting on boards and being an advisor, is they might have a pain point that they say that sounds like this A is the pain point, B is the solution, but you might have to go Z backwards back to B, if you're looking at what the root is, because, just like if you just need more clients, it sounds like we just need more clients. And how many times is it that there's a lot of holes in the boat before
That's exactly right, because that statement is almost always wrong, right? It's separate the signal from the stream is challenging. Kind of like challenging if you have a name like Wade and your mind picks up on that and you're walking through airports, people often say, wait, this is a problem, false positive. You mentioned something about Tai Chi, which just made me think also about the way in which we engage in our days, which we may want to deal with later. But I was running through this really cool little park in Hong Kong, and every little park has people, not old, young, whatever, doing some sort of Tai Chi-like exercise in the mornings. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't remember exactly what the process is, but when you engage in the first meeting a day in countries like that, I find them very productive, very helpful. It's not like, in America, you come in and people are coming in with their AirPods in, they've got a big pile of sugar and caffeine, from $4. Yeah. And they're shoving, and they're like, I don't know why I'm so tired and exhausted, and they're just dumping all this stuff. And they're wired and wound or fatigued. And it takes 3-4 meetings before they become productive, or they're irritable, or whatever.
Interesting.
And the differences in which they just start their energy level is fascinating, because there's that kind of general at peace and not at peace. So that I think it ties together. But I want to go to there's a bunch of stuff I would like to ask you here, and there's probably some functional things. Almost most of the people that I are kind of in my network, I think, are, for the most part, categorically business-oriented, either venture capital or tech, or probably the largest part have to do with recruiting, bringing talent and opportunity together, branding. So everyone, the kind of customer-centric, people-forward, outbound professional and or investor, and people who have probably a drive to have a level of achievement, and that we, erroneously or not, measure a lot of life based on achievement and accomplishment. Yeah. And you have a lot of what you do, which isn't necessarily geared only for output, but a lot of what you do impacts people's ability to have levels of achievement that they choose to, and happiness and health. So I want to get into that, but to get there, let's rewind to, you have a unique background for people in your industry. And I find that it's fascinating how a lot of common tracks that people have in industries, they kind of all have similar thought process. And one thing that makes your practice different, or you different, is that your socialization, is probably different than a lot of people. Having exposure, most Americans only know about America, and athletes don't usually achieve at the level you've achieved, and the list goes on and on. So story-wise, just digging into a little bit, let's go with the origin story.
Okay.
Of there's no doctor yet. The doctor in front of your name doesn't have it yet. You're back here. You're little Roger.
Yeah.
Or whatever you were as a kid.
Yeah. So I was born in Costa Rica, and then around 18 months old, my dad got killed in a car accident. And so you got to imagine the 70s, early 70s in Latin America, now a widowed woman with 4 children.
And where do you fit in the?
So I'm the youngest.
Yeah,
I'm the youngest. So my brother's, he and I are 5 years apart exactly. And so 4 kids within 5 years, and then my dad's out of the picture. And Latin America, especially back then, it's not like it's there is women will go so far,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can, however you want to slice that, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, the opportunity was significantly low.
Yeah. Outside of that, just the practicality of managing 4 kids from infant down, to 5 years old, or 6 years old. It's crazy. So her parents were in Texas at this point. So she moved us up here because she needed help.
And her parents from Costa Rica?
My grandparents, her parents are Scandinavian.
Okay.
So, the most common, the Costa Rican Viking kind of is the background.
Costa Rican Viking and living in Texas. Makes perfect sense.
So my grandparents, they spoke a lot of languages. He ended up working for Texaco, and he was in charge of a lot of Latin America. So he was up and down Latin America a lot. So my mom grew up a lot in Nicaragua, was born in Costa Rica, and then we were there, born in Costa Rica. And then grandparents had already moved on, so they were in Texas, and then she brought us up here. So we went through the process of naturalization, becoming U.S. citizens. So, I mean, it's just the thought of a woman bringing 4 little kids, just a trip on the plane back then. Flights now are casual. Back then it wasn't, right? And so bringing us up here, going through naturalization, becoming American citizens.
How old were you at that point?
So, I mean, I was 18 months. I mean, it was like shortly after that we came
got
up.
it. Yeah.
And then it took a while to get our citizenship and all that kind of stuff. But she went through all that process.
I understand it's easier now. Just kidding.
Yep.
No politics there. We're in Texas.
Just a nice pair of shoes.
Yeah.
So basically, I grew up where my mom was my dad figure, and then I had my granny and grandpa here, and then he passed away from cancer. So shortly after we got here, few years, then he passed away. So now it's me, my mom, my granny, and I have 2 sisters and a brother. So almost entirely a lot of XX chromosomes going on, a lot of female.
Interesting.
So my mom was very much she was the disciplinarian. She was tough. She was like, in my mind as a little kid, she was like the Renaissance woman who could do anything. She bought an RV and gutted it and rebuilt it, and that was like that's any kind of vacation we had was through that RV.
That's awesome.
And so, she played guitar. She loved to dance, all this kind of stuff. And that was I always saw her as a young kid, like she could do anything. And that's just how I always saw her. And my grandmother was like more of like the tender, and she wasn't tender, but she was more the tender type, meaning she was at home all the time. My mom was working and come home tired and take kids here and there and all that kind of thing. But that was our dynamic at home. It was my granny was kind of like the mom figure. My mom was the dad figure. And so I just wasn't around men at all. Like I had no men in my life. And
were you, at what point were you aware of this? Like at some point you don't know, and then
I wasn't aware. Period. It wasn't even a thing. It was not having a father was never a point because I was so young. So that wasn't it never dawned on me like I was missing out on anything. And there's all sorts of things that obviously you get from both parents and all that kind of thing. But I guess like my mom was man enough, and then I had my first male figure in my life, and it was my 6th grade PE coach. And he had 3 rules. He just had 3 rules for PE class. It was, you say yes, sir, you tuck your shirt tail in, and you didn't go anywhere without being an accelerated pace. That rule shaped me. I mean, this is looking back, this is looking way back. It's like, man, that one rule he had shaped shaped so much of me.
Tell me more about that. Don't go anywhere without accelerated pace. How did he articulate it? Is it 6th grade?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What did that mean at that age?
So you dress out, and then let's say you're going from the locker room just to the blacktop.
Mm-hmm.
You run there.
Mm-hmm.
If he said you're going to give the attendance slip, put it on the clip out there, if it's 10 steps, you're running the 10 steps. Mm-hmm. Nowhere do you walk, period. Nothing, nowhere. So it's always an accelerated pace. So much to the point that made such an impact on me that however many years later, past college, past my athletic career, when I got my doctorate, I found him and I wrote him a letter. And he was still around, and he's quite
that's awesome.
Progressed at this time. But
did you run across the stage to get your diploma?
Wasn't in his gym class anymore.
Where was he living at the time?
He was in San Antonio, and actually I sent him a letter not knowing if it was him, and his wife got back to me, and I think that he wasn't in a well state. But so I was kind of back and forth with his wife a couple times. Correspondence, just snail mail. So
but
it was
in hindsight, that was a pivotal relationship, pivotal role.
Yeah. So that was one. I mean, I had disciplinarians at home for sure. I mean, it's not like not having a man around meant that there was no belt coming off the hallway closet. I mean,
your mom sounded like she had that all sorted.
Oh, she had it down.
Is your mom still alive?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep. And so I had plenty of that, but it's different. It was just different having a man and in the picture. Elementary school, every teacher is female for my school. So I still had nothing that would never dawn on me, any of that stuff. But then I have my coach, John Potter. And that was such a big deal. That was a huge moment for me. And then actually, huge moment before that was 84, because that was 85 was my 6th grade year. 84 were the Olympics.
Oh, right.
And so...
That was Los Angeles?
That was the LA Olympics. Yeah. And 80, remember, we boycotted. U.S. boycotted. So I had there was no such thing as Olympics to me.
Sure.
Right? Because now in 84, the summer of 84, I was going into 5th grade. And those Olympics were in LA, and they were insane. Like we had Mary Lou Retton, Carl Lewis.
Oh, right.
I mean, it was, and then just the opening ceremonies. Like I get goosebumps just thinking of. They had the rocket pack man. Remember, if you're a 4th grade, if you're going into 5th grade, you see a man in a rocket pack in 1984.
Yeah, that was for you and I. Those were the first exposure to the idea of the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And 100 years ago when the world was flat. But you're right. I mean, the nationalism.
Yeah.
And so you've got what, Reagan as president?
Yep.
Yeah. Talk about the America.
Yeah.
Right?
And then you had the I think it was the Winter Olympics before was the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah.
And which I didn't know anything about that. I still didn't know anything because Texas, there's no such thing as Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
But that Olympic Games, just the opening ceremonies was so powerful to me. And then I was just enthralled with it. And then it was either I was watching Dukes of Hazzard. That's the only thing I knew on TV. Yeah. And then there's the Olympics. I saw that and it just was like, it so captured me. I just kept watching it. So I watched all the Mary Lou stuff, but then I remember vividly, I was in my granny's room, standing underneath the ceiling fan with they all had that tassel.
Yeah, it's like this when the fan went around.
And I see this guy in the high jump, and I see him starting to go up. And when he should start coming down, he doesn't. He just keeps going up. It's like my eyes didn't, I saw this thing that didn't make sense, but yet I saw it. And then he snakes over this bar, and it was just a moment where like that, a question like slammed in my mind was how high? I mean, that And so I'm standing under this ceiling fan, and I just looked up. I just thought, well, I wonder if I can kick that. And I jump up and try to do kind of like a bicycle kick in soccer. I'm sure I missed it, but I landed flat on my back. But that moment put in this how high question. And
I love that. So there's a vision now of something you saw, and then your failed Fosbury flop.
Yep.
I like it.
And it was just, I think it was like the whole Olympics was what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like from those who won and those, I think that was the same Olympics. I'm pretty sure where there's a woman in the women's marathon who is dead last, and you come in, the last part, you come in and do at least a lap and finish the race there. And she was full on dysfunctional and stumbling like Bambi on ice.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, she finished.
Mm-hmm.
She finished, but she did not win.
Mm-hmm.
But it just got to what was in her.
Yeah.
And like that whole thing, from watching Carl Lewis break world records, every event he got into, it looked like, and then that how high thing, and then even just like being enthralled with the struggle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't the win. It wasn't. I mean, it was awesome. Like hearing the Star Spangled Banner when they were on the top of the podium, and just like seeing the impact it had on them. Yeah, something about that kind of shaped the what's possible kind of comment, or the how high kind of thing. And I didn't realize this at the time. This is like reflection that these moments it dawned on me of this, but there's what's possible. There's move your ass, which is accelerated pace. And part of that accelerated pace thing is coach isn't always looking. So part of it was in your group, it really highlighted the slackers. And I don't know if it's because I would want to be a pleaser for him. I don't know what. It kind of sickened me to see that. It doesn't sit well with me. I just don't tolerate that well.
You have transferred that to your son. One thing I noticed this year in wrestling was when the things got really difficult that started to separate, the heat separates, that, it's what you do when no one's watching that counts. And that's one thing I noticed with Laird is that you can tell, in wrestling, on the mat isn't when you win. It reveals how you've been. And I think that's very similar. That's that unseen time. So did you then also, you mentioned some of the maybe disappointment or pain or struggle. Was that the Olympics where Mary Decker got tripped by Zola Budd, the barefoot runner? Was that a different one?
Man, I don't recall.
But the Olympics end up having moments.
Yeah.
Where there's dramatic disappointment, not your fault, those things fall apart.
Yeah.
It seems like that was a very emotional, maybe not emotional at the time, but psychologically impacting exposure.
For with the marathon runner who physically almost could not. I mean, literally hands and knees, crawling back up, falling down. I admired that. I mean, it moves me.
Do you ever reflect on that when you feel you're struggling, or on moments like that?
I think part of that made me. I think because these happen as you watch TV, they happen right next to each other. Maybe this is where, because I kind of, as a father, with the kids being real little, I was like, and I'm sure I have some inner conversations about fatherhood and this and that, since I didn't really, didn't have that. But one of the things I came to was this concept of joyful suffering. And it's just like, maybe it happened. I never thought about it until now we're talking, but maybe it happened watching these things happening so close together, these insane elations, world records, and major disappointment and pain and suffering, but pushing.
Yeah. That's you gave me a flashback to something that I think that willful disappointment. What would you? Well, suffering.
Joyful suffering.
Joyful suffering. I wasn't even close. Joyful suffering. So, about a month ago or whatever, I did this run where I was not a runner, and I'd run like 5 miles prior, and this is 92. I think it was day 2.
Wait, finish. If those don't know it, you ran 100 miles.
Well, 92. So 140 kilometers. We ran across the Baja Peninsula. We were the first Americans to do it. So I'm not a runner, but I had committed to someone I've invested in his company, and he had a cause he was trying to support. He had run a marathon, last fall, so was not prepared the way he wanted to be, but prepared. I had not. I committed to do it. I trained, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and use that lightly. But yeah, it was, the first day it was 46 miles. Excuse me. I hadn't even run a half marathon ever in my life, so it was a bit. Started with 8 or 9 miles in the sand. And then that was a rough day. Day 2 was over Mountain Pass. There's 4 peaks, and that one was 28 miles over that. Now, that one wasn't all running because more like little goat trails, but it was not insignificant. And then 18 miles the last day, and we made it. So clearly I was not physically prepared. Although, to be fair, I'm in decent physical shape. So muscles, cardio were fine. I just wasn't in running shape. So everywhere a muscle attached to a bone, there were issues. But I had enough advice from Big Bob and others, and you gave me advice on posture, those kind of things, just those basic fundamentals, basic fundamentals. I knew I could go 100 miles. I mean, anyone could start walking and go 100 miles. Yeah. Not anyone, but so I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to walk. So then just paced it up. But it was drinking, hydrating, electrolytes, food, all of that along the way. And inflammation control was a real problem. But going through that, there were people from around the world who were doing this for real. And I was just imposter syndrome, but I did it. But where I was going with that is there were people sitting around night 2, I think it was, in a lot of pain. Luckily, I had good advice on feet management, so I didn't have any blisters. And they were using terms that they thought were positive, like you just have to embrace the suck.
Oh, yeah.
All this kind of stuff. And there's this guy, very tiny framed Mexican guy from that area, and he didn't say anything the whole time. And my assumption is he didn't understand English well enough to engage. After everyone got time done, talking about how strong they were to deal with the street, he said, I was just thinking of how wonderful it is to be able to have an experience this daunting. And yeah, that's the way to look at it, right? It's like you said about in the Olympics, it's so impactful, it's so challenging and hard, it's beautiful. That level of intensity, he was like, I'm going to feel good about completing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel great about doing something that no one's done yet. And that's what made me think of your comment, that joy and sorrow interwoven, right? The idea is how you create great fabric.
Well, it's kind of like, I imagine for a lot of people who follow your stuff, is that would be similar to taking something that could have real impact business-wise or in connections, or what my money can do to make an outcome like this. And there's whatever the thing is, like you said, in music, athletics, parenting, there's just no way around it. There is struggle to be had. And to be too quick to just to do so much work to make it comfortable kind of misses, I think, like you're saying, the beauty in and really getting to enjoy the backside of that.
Yeah.
And if everything that we do is so we don't feel that the pain of when it's tough or when we actually do try but fail, like participation trophies and these kind of things, we're just we're stealing when we get to wherever we're at. We're stealing the experience there.
Yeah.
And then, not like this is where the joyful suffering kind of comes in, is like this suffering, you can choose to say, enjoy the suck, or you can choose to say, man, how blessed I am that I'm here and getting to do this.
Yeah.
And it hurts, but it hurts,
And I can take one more step. I can take one more drink of water. I can do the next thing. And I think that this, well, you would understand this more than most people, was pain is one of the greatest things that we have. Like if you don't have pain, if I'm leaning on the stove and I don't know, my arms burn off, that's not good. And if we try and take that from kids, for example, you get a trophy whether you tried or didn't try. Why should I try? And like our kids, we never get our kids allowance. And that's just me as being conservative, but I don't want to pay them to exist.
Yeah.
Now we create opportunity for them to do a thing, cause and effect. But yeah, it is interesting how that level of, I think in the Western world too, we have, and historically we're incredibly rich. There's abundance and excess, even though we all think we don't. In reality it's ridiculous, the level of comfort we have.
Yeah.
Where you go to some parts of the world or any parts in this country too, where it's certainly not guaranteed you're going to be able to eat. Like, will your children survive through the night? Like those kinds of things, the safety factor of like, if I pass through this 3-kilometer area, will I live or die? Like we're not exposed to that. And so therefore we want to coddle. But if you look at almost every tribal, group throughout history, they have some sort of proving mechanism to make them tough, to make it hard.
Yeah. Interesting that you say that, because you just made me think of, and when it's not absolutely hard, meaning not relatively, but from an absolute scale, are we making a big pile of something out of very little so that we can feel like we're doing something that's tough and suffering, so that we've actually done something?
I think it's human nature. I mean, like time management, there's no such thing. It's task management, because you will fill the time. 24 hours, everyone on the planet's going to fill it with different things. It's like you get a set of cupboards, no matter how many you have, they're going to be full of something.
Yep.
And I think that's people who have a job that they put all the time and effort into, and they come home stressed out and they work. And then you see a situation, for example, this may or may not be true of anyone who had worked at Twitter at the time. When you learn about Twitter, and 80% of the workforce was reduced, and some of those were hired back. Those jobs, every one of those people probably was putting a ton of time and effort into that. They'd been educated to do it. They'd worked hard. They're putting 40 hours a week, whatever, some amount of time into it. They're working after hours. They're stressed out about went away, boom. Was it important? And I think that idea of what's vital and what's not is pretty crazy. There's a quick Wade story. My brothers and I had saved up enough money when we were little kids, and we bought this cheap little house in York, Nebraska. So not very much money, but we were able to buy it, and it was a dump. And I can't remember why.
You're how old?
Grade school. But we had raised cattle and stuff, and we put together enough money, and we were able to, borrow enough to this little property. My dad had worked at the local bank, and he made sure that we were able to get whatever. So I think we paid cash, but again, small town Nebraska, it wasn't much. And it was foreclosure and stuff. So we worked all summer getting rid of all the weeds and the bushes, and we cleaned the house out. It was just 3 months of 4 of us working our butts off. Finally, we got it we're respectable, not great, and we ended up selling it. We drove by 2 days later, they dozed it and put up a duplex. And it was so, what? And very quickly, my dad's lesson was, where was the value? All the things we thought were important, they're going to doze it. 0% of our effort going to that property added value. They wanted the dirt. And that's been for me, a real lesson too of what matters. the essence of what matters is probably very small. There's something that really matters, and a lot of it probably doesn't. It's extraneous. So the Olympics, they have this impact on you, and then and then you have this father figure in your life or male figure in your life that also the foundation of success, one of them, especially in athletics, he gave you, right? Of the idea that there's a different level of performance and expectations of you, even when it's seemingly an unimportant time when you're accelerating.
Yeah.
Did that impact your engagement in sports, or when did you start really competing?
So yeah, seventh grade is the first time that you can compete for your school, and where I was growing up.
In every sport?
Yeah. So there's no sixth grade sport. So there's no school-based sport. So sixth grade, I have the accelerated pace, rule that came in. And I think just because of my mom and my granny, there was going to be no walking even when nobody was watching. I think that's just parenting, And then there's sports in school, and that, I usually was doing well with that, and kind of, that was kind of where I shined with things. And that kind of just went throughout. And
Which sports did you play?
I played football. Young, but we did everything. That's back in you just did what season it was. Yeah. Baseball, football, all this stuff. Never soccer. And then...
Was soccer a sport here at that time?
There was soccer around. Yeah. It just never did it.
It wasn't very Texan.
Yeah. So then in high school, I was football and track. And our football team set a school record for the worst team ever. I think we still hold it. Track was I was a pole vaulter. So it's funny because I didn't think about this till I had retired from pole vaulting. But that how high question, I just was so, pole vaulting was the coolest thing. And I had a really great friend who, he ended up being an Olympic world record holder, but he was a swimmer. He and I would pole vault with a broken pole, just jump over trash bags and stuff when we were real little. And then once I could do it for school, it was a ton of fun because, go up, you land in the mats, and it was just super fun. And I didn't have to do all the running that the other guys did.
Yes, exactly. Now, if you performed poorly, did you ever have to run? We had a coach who would do that to us. It wasn't perform poorly. It was essentially probably bad behavior. I don't remember. I remember there were some tournaments where, because there's track and field, Anfield people were different, right? So we'd get done pole vaulting and then they were all running. But then if we did something wrong, then we'd have to run the 4x4, all of us.
Yeah, we never had that. Yeah. I know that happens for sure. I know that happens. We never had that.
So, but did you have fun, or did the coach make it fun? What was fun about it?
It was fun by virtue of what pole vaulting was.
Yeah,
it was scary. It was what's possible. It was, I got to wear spikes. I wore spikes on the blacktop. Yeah. It didn't make any sense, but it was just cool to wear different shoes,
But back to what you wear, how you feel.
Yeah.
You feel different with spikes on them,
Totally.
So did you have anyone in your life who was pretty overprotective, or who was trying to don't go get hurt and don't take risks? So you had the freedom to be, like you mentioned, maybe you're in a household without a father, but you didn't have the constraint, or you didn't have a overprotective constraint.
We were free range kids. You came up, back then, you come home when it's dark. That's how it was. And you played football in the front yard. It was just, right. It was a different world back then. And unfortunately, because that's something that, I think is super valuable. And it wasn't, there wasn't fear on those kind of things. We rode our bikes everywhere and crossed all the streets and all that kind of stuff.
It's a different expectation of character, but human nature hasn't changed. So I have belief that could be the same again.
Yes.
My optimism.
I hope so.
I prefer to go through life with the pains of optimism versus the pains of pessimism.
That's right.
So, so now you're vaulting, you have fun doing it.
So yeah, and that ends up turning into, go to state my junior and senior year. And back then there was no email. So colleges, if you're being recruited, they sent letters to your high school.
Mm-hmm.
So
And did they recruit you based on viewing or based on just they saw the numbers?
I think it's just, I think you just see the numbers.
So what's your height now? So junior, you qualified for state at about what height?
14.6.
14.6?
Yeah.
Which is my best height ever. And so now you're getting ready to actually start. So then senior year?
That was actually same.
Senior,
There's a couple of crazy stories in there, but basically I went from a 12.6 vaulter to in one day at regionals, I go 14.6.
How? Did you change poles?
Well, I'll tell you a superstitious, stupid thing, but you know those troll dolls?
Yeah.
My buddy and I, Robert, we're both pole vaulting, and I just stuck this troll doll on the field there by the pit, and I said, as long as that troll doll's standing, I'm going to clear bars.
That's amazing. I mean, for people that don't have context, in pole vaulting, especially once you get to your height, whatever it is, you increments, at that age, you're probably going up by 6-inch increments,
yeah,
right?
6 inch.
So
yeah.
6-inch increment is a big personal best. Like if you were going, usually maybe 3 inches, right? And 2 feet.
2 feet, it's crazy.
I've never heard
unheard
of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it happened.
Were you using the same pole?
I can't remember.
You had to have gone up.
I can't remember.
Depends on where your grip was.
Yeah, I can't remember how that was, but I remember I did that, and I even remember my buddy Robert's like, what is this? And then at 15 feet, the troll doll was down, and kind of like the RAF, you know, then I was done.
Yeah.
So, but then I had some eyeballs from some schools, and I didn't return any letters, none. So my mom didn't know. Nobody knew anything about any schools looking, and I didn't share it.
Why?
I think because I had a thing that I didn't want to be a fuss. You know, I think something about that. I don't know. I just didn't like even in qualifying for high school nationals. It was a trip to indoor nationals was in New York, outdoor nationals was in California. And the thought of my mom buying a plane ticket for me to go jump somewhere was like, it was not even, I didn't even let her know.
So you qualified for nationals and didn't go because you didn't want to be a burden or whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know exactly. I couldn't be, I didn't want to take the money. I didn't want to be spent on, you know?
Yeah.
But that all happened to the point, this is crazy since my son is graduating this year, and all the stuff that parents go through to get their kids ready for college these days. I graduated high school with no plan. I was, in my head, I'm going to college somewhere, but I wasn't. And I just happened to, back then it was all corded phones. And so I just happened to walk by our home phone, and it rang, and I picked it up, and it was a coach from Texas State, and he says, hey, I see that you didn't sign with anybody. Do you want to come run for us? I was like, yeah. And that was how it happened.
On scholarship or just walk on?
So I had a scholarship right out, and then from a separate sports thing, and then I got a scholarship there after my first. It was not right away.
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating. So imagine in today's world, some kid getting through without somebody hovering around, making sure that they were.
Yeah. Well, I was the fourth kid. I mean, I'm sure my mom was just exhausted, Yeah. And so, but that all turned into great college experience, great people I met, great coaches, and we had a lot of foreigners on our team. And so we had a lot of Jamaicans, a lot of Swedes. And I remember one of the Swedes, as I'm getting toward the end of my college career, saying, how come you're not jumping for Costa Rica? Never occurred to me, never even a thought. I was like, why aren't I?
Yeah, because the competition is.
I was a big fish in a little pond.
Yeah.
Over there. So when I graduated school, I had my first career. I had already started while I was in college. I was a SeaWorld color whale trainer. That was what I That was my first.
Explain that.
So during the summer, we went to a job fair during school and saw the SeaWorld booth there, and I just knew I wanted to do something with it. I had 5 criteria: animals, outside, physical, every day had to be different from the previous day, and no suit. I had to wear a wetsuit, but that wasn't the suit I was talking about. Yeah. So I got the job there, and so I became an animal trainer at SeaWorld.
That's cool.
And it was kind of like a dream job. I mean, it fit all my criteria. Never thought I'd leave. But then I have this opportunity to pole vault for Costa Rica. And so now I'm out of school. And actually, I'm just kind of hitting my prime at 23, 24. So just out of college age, I started getting physically really good at that point. And I was trying to do animal training and pole vault.
In Costa Rica now?
This is in San Antonio because I was still at SeaWorld. So I was trying to train. Still didn't have anything set up for Costa Rica yet, but we had time. I have a lot of family down there, so I was going to take time off from SeaWorld and just see what the possibilities are. Go down, bring a couple videotapes of the stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, we want you on." And I was like, "Great!" This all started moving really fast, but then I had to make a decision on: do I leave this dream job? They hire like 1 or 2 people max per year because a lot of people want that kind of job and very few get it. So if I left, I didn't know what the possibilities were. So ultimately, it ended up being that I thought, okay, a life of regret or no regret. If I can try and fail, but I tried, I would have less regret. So I left SeaWorld with plans to come back, and then was able to compete for Costa Rica, travel the world like that for a little bit. And that's where I had at the end of my first season, it went super, super well. And then we were at the Central American Caribbean Games in Venezuela, and I was our country's best hope for a medal. And I was jumping out of my mind at that time. And the day before, I remember eating these eggs.
Oh no! Did you have your troll doll with you?
So hot. It was not so hot. So it was 2 days before, and it was I lost some weight that night. I was super sick, but we had a team chiropractor, and she adjusted me, and my fever broke. I mean, it was like clear distinction. Yep. And I saw her doing some other things with other people. Full what we would call miracles happen. One of the locals there that she was treating, she did one treatment with him the day before. He comes in crying that next day, really fast Spanish, and like something's about to go down. And then they like grab each other, hug and cry. And the story was that his entire life he's gone to bed knowing that he's going to wake up in a panic because he can't breathe and he's got to do albuterol to get to survive. He had one adjustment, chiropractic adjustment, and slept through the night for the first time in his life.
Wow.
And I thought, what is this? And then I get adjusted and my fever breaks. So I ended up getting 4th. So I missed the medal, jumping the same height as the 3rd place guy. But that's how, I had more misses.
Criteria, right? Misses, yeah.
Yeah. So in my mind, it was like super crushing. And I had a moment there, and there's, tens of thousands of people here. I just had my 3rd miss. And so in my mind, what I do is I javelin my pole, I rip my shoes off and have a fit, and I just go nuts. And that's what I'm doing in here. My outward body walks to my bag, puts the pole in the bag. I get my shoes off. And this is in Venezuela. It's basically a soccer stadium. And they have those tunnels that go down. I find that tunnel, and I go down there, and I lose my mind down there. And it was, I felt like it was the weight of the country on me. Like this was the medal that, and probably nobody even knew. But what hit me was this. The reason I didn't have a fit outwardly is I thought, man, out there somewhere is a kid, and what if they're watching? Mm-hmm. How you win, how you lose. And I just said, take it somewhere else. Then I see another miracle happen with chiropractic the next day. Miracle. And it hit me. I thought, there's something going on here that I didn't understand. And so I started hanging out with the chiropractors. And when we went back to Costa Rica, I shadowed them. And I saw an experience. I had this experience that really brought me back to that moment when maybe there's a kid watching me. Mm-hmm. And it hit me as like all this training, all the hours, the pain, the broken bones, all the stuff. Mm-hmm. And what is my impact? And my impact is maybe somebody watches, and maybe somewhere down the line that impacts them, and maybe that has some ripple in the world. It just hit me. I was like, man, there's a lot of maybe there, where this woman, the chiropractor, there was no maybe. Mm-hmm. She puts her hands on somebody and things happen. Mm-hmm. No maybe about it. Guaranteed things happen. Mm-hmm. And I remember she was working on the people that we drove to. We get in the car. It's her and her partner, another chiropractor in the front. And I'm in the back driving, and they're just having a conversation. And I just said, how many years is chiropractic school? They stopped the car, and that started that changed so I retired from pole vaulting. And
was that your last event?
That was, yeah.
And first, the experience of whatever you want to call it, emotion management or visible emotion management, I think is really interesting too, where my actions have an impact on others. And I think sometimes people get that and sometimes they don't. I had an experience where at one point, and this was in wrestling, but I was not pleased with the loss. I very much showed it significantly. And I had a coach really get in my face about it. And you need to learn how to be a good loser kind of thing. And I, of course, quick tongue, turned it around, said I'd rather not be like you. And so that was not good. But I had we had a year where we had a lot of success. And what I noticed was we won the state championship, first time our school had won kind of that and anything. I was shocked. No one cared about that sport. But the number of people in the community and the kids and all that the positive impact had, that actually helped me realize people watch. Yeah. And the same thing is from that moment, just like you said, I have myself and all of my sons have had moments where that one thing that meant everything, at some point, everybody's got set in life. In life, you have that thing that it all fell apart. That thing that mattered so much. Yeah. Which I think you have to have that. I don't think you have to, but I think that's very good for the soul. Yeah. To realize that you can't do everything you think you can, even though we go through all. But that point of how do you handle it? And some people handle it amazingly well. I've been really blessed. Like my kids handle it way better than I do. Others never let go their whole life. And they carry those bags. And I've watched with people, if they keep those bags, their hands aren't free to help anybody else. And that external throwing a tantrum in a grocery store, turning toys out of the prems, as Brits would say, it's selfish, right? And so that moment where I think it's really kind of a beautiful thing if you did the things you needed to do, but you didn't suppress the emotion. Mm-hmm. I would imagine in that tunnel, you really don't want that video, right? But although, had you not done that, and you suppress all those emotions, that's probably
it wouldn't have dawned on me to even think of the question of impact. Mm-hmm. I would have just emoted and moved on. If I just did that, it means I wouldn't think. Being a professional athlete is one of the most selfish things that someone can choose, and because you have to. Their plans, these birthdays, these activities, like you have to say no to a lot of stuff because I need to train. I need to do this. And it's just a selfish thing. And I don't mean in a bad way. So is being an entrepreneur. So is starting up a business. So is a lot of stuff.
Flying 150 flights a year internationally, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's like, but there's a reason behind it. And for me, that moment, had I not gone through that collapse, and just imagine this kid out there. There's just a kid. I just happened to catch a kid, and whatever it was, but there was a moment there, and it just was like, man, what all this work, all these years, all this work for a maybe impact. It was amazing to me. And how sad, like when you say, well, maybe you don't have to have that, but I can't imagine a life where you don't get to have that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because the things that cause the roots to go down, it's usually a drought.
Yeah.
Right? You got to dig deep. And I think stick on that moment for just a minute. You're still in the stadium though. Public failure is one thing that's very hard to face. You had the most public type of failure in your mind that you could have, right? You're vaulting, which is a person does or does not clear the bar in front of a massive stadium of people. How do you think about public failure relative to private failure where others don't see it?
I don't. It's almost never been what others think matters very little to me, except for those I have put my value in.
How did you get there? How did you get to that point where you determine who you look to please or to, model behavior for?
That's a really good question. Love, maybe. It's the people that I love. And their opinion matters. Mm-hmm. And I can appreciate other people's opinions, but they have no bearing on me. Yep. And I think as an entrepreneur and as in a lot of your sphere of people that you know, and I know it's a different set of rules because of all the stuff that I would call BS out there. Corporations have to operate in certain ways because of perceptions and these kind of things. And and do they have to? I mean, look at Elon Musk, who says no to a lot of that stuff. There's a guy running for president right now who says no to all that stuff, who's overwhelmingly the favorite and has a movement. And so it would be interesting, before we start shooting, you're talking about a digital detox and these kind of things that some people will do. Man, what if we just did caring what people think of people who aren't part of your world?
This ties back to the question about my optimism about the world that you mentioned growing up in, where you were out, you could do whatever, you came home when it was dark, you were safe, it was fine, people were accountable for each other. One hypothesis is you knew who mattered most. There was a value system more than likely, but even without any sort of religious or spiritual value system, the idea that what matters most are the people I love and care about. And long term, when people were thinking multi-generational, if you think about a business person who's running a small business in a town that's their maybe first or maybe third generation, but they're thinking about how will this impact my community? How will this impact my children probably inherit the business? And how will she or he, how will this impact them? It's very different than quarterly earnings calls. And if I say this word versus that word because it's not with the right ideology, my stock price goes down. I've been in that world where silence is violence or whatever it is that you're held to, this level of the way that you succeed in a game like that is you know the rules of the game and you play the game. If you're going to play Monopoly, you take a risk every time, buy every property, no matter what. I don't play real life like that. It's really stressful and really hard. But that game, that rule set works. And I think what it does is it gets people's mindset. Academia teaches failure's bad. It's good good marks are good even if you doesn't matter how you got them, even if you're taking a underwater basket weaving. The professional world kind of teaches vanity metrics and measuring all the things that don't matter, or people can't take that. And the idea that you're not pleasing the people who are long-term impactful in life because of who you are and because of your relationship with them, but you're pleasing some other entity because of what they can do to you. I feel like that is a key thing that's different, is that what you articulated so beautifully about you're going to care about those you love and other people you're considered interesting input, right? And I think that that's also a good litmus test for how we better feel about ourselves. Some people believe that there's a spiritual entity that they are going to be held accountable to that gives you a consistent standard throughout your life. And even right or wrong, it gives a consistent standard. I have found, for me, that 3 primary religions of the world, or 4, I guess, pretty much fundamentally similar in that, in humanity. There are those who believe it's their spouse, their children, or whatever. And that, again, consistent set of standards throughout. Their life is usually pretty predictable. As soon as it gets to be, who do I please today? How many likes did I get? How do I feel about myself based on how everybody I don't know interacted? Do I know that new thing or that thing? And was I invited to this or not? Pretty soon we start thinking about acceptance and rejection from a tribe of people that have their own set of standards. I mean, it just creates this weird environment and a bunch of mental health problems.
You saying that stuff, like, I feel stress because I never think about that. You just saying that just feels like this life suck that comes on me.
You're welcome.
Like, man, I can't imagine. And I know people, it's a very real thing that a lot of people deal with. And I'm just never there. I'm just not there. And these are, a lot of us put ourselves in cages for different reasons, but this was a cage that very purposefully goes out to grab you. And it's designed for that.
By design.
And it's so sad. But part of the reason I think where I can peacefully and respectfully not care, it's not like, I value that you have an opinion. Doesn't mean I have to value what you say. Mm-hmm. But good on you for having that.
You don't have to be a tryhard for them.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But I think that also comes from a place of, I believe that God made me. I believe that he made me with special gifts. I believe he's made me with adaptable ways to where I can get some skills. But there is a more narrow window that I was built for. And, I love the story of Joseph in the Bible where he took the long path to be the Pharaoh's, right-hand man. And I feel like that's a lot of what life is going through these trials to become stronger and stronger, but to get to a point where that I was made for something particular. There is faith in that. So if you don't have faith, I don't know how you have that kind of peace, but I have a belief, and I'm on this continuous journey of what that looks like now. And like what I'm moving into now is different. Like I've got my last 20 years of doing what I've been doing in the clinic is leading me into a next phase of some things that I was built for. And I couldn't see it then. I couldn't see it back, all back. But part of that faith in that is what's helping to create peace in trying new things, failing. Like I don't have a problem failing. I don't like to fail. But when I fail, I'm always at a better spot than before I started pursuing it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things you said that's actually the most compassionate to others is also knowing yourself. And the best advice I've ever received along this line too is, and even in, how do you thrive in an ecosystem that doesn't align with your particular value systems? I would argue that it does. It's in a different way. Like humans aren't that different, and you can conduct yourself in the right way. You mentioned Joseph. He didn't choose that path. His brothers threw him in. Like his brothers ditched him, like for dead. And then he does the right thing and he throws him in prison again. And then the people forget him for 2 years. He went through a bunch of stuff where he was rejected and life wasn't great. And but I think that like our sons, in high school in the U.S., they're asked early on, "What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" That wrong question. If we can teach, who do you want to become? Who do you want to be? Become the right person. Then those doors open. Those paths come together. Like, how would you have known you're going to be pole vaulting for Costa Rica and one of the best athletes in the world? How would you know you're going to enter this occupation? How would you know? Why would you want to know that? Like if you could have foreseen the future, how boring would it be to just live through it?
Yeah.
Those adjustments to the next phase. And I love what you're seeing now too. Is I'm shocked at how many people are 30 years old, and how many people are 80 and young.
Yeah.
I went to one class reunion. I was class president my senior year. I was supposed to reunion. I'm like, whatever. I went to one at, was it 25th maybe? And nice people. But if I was going to if we were going to stay in touch, we did on social media anyway. So the idea though of like the next phase, so you're already looking at like, there's a next level up, right? You're not going to idle. You're either growing or you're rotting. So what I heard you say is preparing for assembling the things to take you to the next level, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and still have to be at the space where you are, like fully. And I think, for me anyway, questions start coming up, or people come into my life and push me towards something. And once there's this kind of draw toward this new phase, there's extra prayer and some of that stuff to like, is this something I should pursue?
And that's what a lot of people say. Well, why are you doing this, that, and learning? Are you tired of what you're doing? Like, no, that's not the point. But if preparedness and opportunity have to meet, if you try to prepare once the opportunity shows up, too late. You have to be prepared. Like if this great opportunity comes up, that if you can buy this thing for $1 million and you sell it next week for $100 million. If you don't have $1 million, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like putting those assets in the bank are so important because then our doors open, and I'm sure your life's been like that too. Like most important relationship in my life, Andrea and I just met and happened to be ready, and it worked. We spent about 20 days together, got married. It's been all right for 26 years.
Wow.
And every opportunity has been unplanned. From Omaha, Nebraska, to London, to Chicago, to Austin. None of those were like, hey, we really want to move to that place. Something occurred, and it was like, this is the pull. So anyway, I completely agree with you and just appreciate that perspective.
So for you, then, because one of the things I think that is really easy to do for people like me, which I think probably lots of people, your natural way, because we met just a few years ago, your natural way is you're sharp, you're quick, you're well-spoken, it's organized, and that's just Wade. He's naturally like that, which you just shared a story of an outcome after a wrestling match where that's not who you were. Mm-hmm. So you weren't always this person, but it's so easy for people to look at people who've achieved certain areas and say, that's just Wade, and he's just that way, lucky Wade. Mm-hmm. So let's go to, if I was going to make an analogy, like a jewel is worth a lot. Mm-hmm. Just a plain old stone, maybe not so much. So before the gem was revealed, and it's just a rock in the ground, kind of take us, I want to kind of get, how did you become who you are, in the sense that there's people who very much value you. There's all this sphere of influence that you have, but you had to develop that. I mean, some of it is just, I do believe you're just gifted with stuff, but if you didn't work on it, it would be probably wasted.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I appreciate the sentiment that there's something of value beyond the coal. Yeah, I mean, using the analogy of carbon or coal to diamond, it takes a lot of heat and a lot of pressure and a lot of time. All of those. And people are like, look at this beautiful thing. Yeah, look what it went through. Look what that poor dinosaur went through.
Yeah.
It surprises me too. I forget. So I don't think that I'm successful yet, as it relates to macro, like accomplishment or everything's relative.
Mm-hmm.
If you economically you just keep moving the decimal to the right, and you still wish you needed another decimal. Like, it's all the same. Like when you first are a kid and you are like, wow, I can't wait till I can make $100. And then imagine if you had it's all relative. Yeah. But the process itself, I had a conversation the other day with someone, and I was talking about something economically, and I didn't realize this person, they thought that I was, grew up in some economically advanced thing and everything was great. Like, I slept in a bedroom, upstairs, there was no heat upstairs. And you put the water, by your bed in the morning, you have ice on it. And, we bought all of our own stuff. I was also the fourth kid, fourth boy. So I don't think I saw new clothes.
Yeah.
I don't know. And like pictures, I don't think they had any made. They're like, he's like the others. Yeah. Make another one. But, and an environment that was pretty competitive and I don't think I love you, I don't know that I ever heard that except right prior to punishment. I love you, but none of that was really that significant to me. But the things that I think, yeah, your talents are God's gift to you. I think what you do with them is your gift to him. I certainly don't think I'm particularly talented in anything. Maybe tenacity. Being the fourth boy, you learn how to equalize things and eventually win. But, so for example, I was fortunate, but I grew up in an area, we're on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, I was young, and it was my family and my grandfather across the road. And we would go to town maybe once a month, me. So I wasn't around other people. Mm. So verbal skills were not the thing.
Wow.
You're on a horse out in, wrestling, nonverbal sport, So, engineering, interacting with people was a means to an end. We would, in our house, when we moved to Nebraska then, little town, but the kids, if mom and dad were gone, we would argue for a long time over who had to pick up the phone and call to order pizza. It was just so awkward. And so that was, but anyway, I think that was one where it was, in every case, I think the desire, the dream, the goal was big enough that I was willing to go through the struggle. The people part, I was always really nervous around people, and public speaking was terrible. Hated it. So wrestling in college, my freshman year, I got a call from somebody who was calling down the wrestling roster from a guy recruiting for a direct sales business. And the guy I respected a lot. He's like, hey, we don't know each other. Mutual contact, and Dave Droga, how do you know him? Hey, Dave. He said, yeah, he's one of the captains of our team, great guy. He said, listen, I'm expanding a business, whatever he said. And he sat down and pitched me. And I said, great. He said he'd help me. All right. And I had to call and book appointments and do meetings. And I knew I needed that. One is I saw the money.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any. So that was handy. And I remember every Sunday night, I'd make, calls to try and book my calendar. I'd try to have just 2 or 3 meetings a week. So it'd take me, 10 conversations, whatever the numbers were. Mm-hmm. Well, now I understand it's a numbers game. Every one of those calls was stressful. I would put on a suit and tie and have this little routine. I didn't have a troll, but same thing. And I'd pick up the phone, and I had a script in front of me, and I was sweating, and it was just and I remember the first time I went and did a meeting with a whiteboard and standing in front of people, I had my notes all in this, what do they call, recipe cards or whatever?
Yeah, the little note cards, yeah.
In red felt pen, and I had my inside pocket. And when I went to pull them out, I was just sweating profusely. Number one, it's round, I can't read it. And I look like I've been shot.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And I'm like, well, and I just threw the cards, and I'm like, I don't know, and then I found out that's a much better way to interact with people. So, but cycles, I probably was in front of crowds, from 5 to 3,000 in my 20s, with 50 weeks in a year. So let's call it 100. So definitely I've got 10,000 repetitions of doing stuff. And eventually, Malcolm Gladwell, you get better at it. And what matters? Back to that real estate thing.
Yeah.
What matters? And I found in that point when I was trying to either recruit somebody to do something, do they have a dream? Are they willing to work? And are they willing to fail? That's it. I didn't do an hour presentation.
Nice.
I had those questions. What I didn't know, the fourth variable, is are you honest? Find that out later. So I got to the point where it wasn't about me, and it wasn't, that in that case with trying to influence people, I wasn't trying to sell somebody. I wasn't trying to close them. I was information seeking. Do you have those things in your area? If I called you and said, do you want to go play pickleball instead of racquetball? And you said no, I'm going to call Aaron and say, hey, you want to play pickleball? Sure, I'll go play pickleball. My goal is to find a pickleball partner.
Yeah.
I'm not offended. You want to play racquetball? So I started realizing those things of not becoming so self-centered and insecure. And I really just noticed the results, cause and effect. So that was about people skills. But engineering was the mindset, but, I didn't want to be an engineer once I looked at CubeLand. So my brother and I had a construction company, didn't love that. And I realized, where is money made? Because when you grow up really broke, you kind of want some. And people, money does my happiness. Yeah, it makes misery a lot more fun, though. I mean, poverty doesn't my happiness either, So I looked at that and said, okay, because most of the stresses I saw in life were economic.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sort of that pain go away. But I think I started looking at the idea that, where are they going with that? The place where money is made must be where the buyer and seller meet. The marketplace. If you look throughout history, so okay. Where does ecosystem happen in nature? At the river. Right, otherwise. So okay, I need to learn that. Again, now salespeople, I don't want to do that because I thought, used car sales or whatever. Yeah. It should be a perfect marriage. I need cars, they have cars. Yeah. Why is this hard? But so I realized I need to learn sales. I know I need to learn how that transaction happened, just intellectually. Because everything, math was always, I got perfect scores on my math, college entrance exams and stuff, because it was obvious to me. But I didn't have the people skills. Math was obvious, and if you don't get it, you're dumb. That was kind of my mindset, which was not very helpful in influencing others. So then I got into, and I took a sales role, selling internet connectivity to businesses. I knew that B2B, business to business sales, was going to be more logical for me. I didn't want the emotional thing of I like this color or not. And I started realizing it's an art and a science. I'm like, again, what matters? And lots of people they like all this noise and they care about all these things. And it's using American football analogy, points on the board, not yards gained.
Yep.
And so, that started obvious. I'm like, okay, I want to understand how this works. And then the second thing I saw was 1 is too small of a number to make a big difference. So for me to be great in the art of selling, great. But then if I want to go to what I really want to do, which is go to Costa Rica, I'm not making money. So I said, but I need to learn leadership. And especially people, now at this point, I'd had a lot of mentors.
So you made this leap, this sales leap to leadership leap is when? How old are you, and what's, you did that on your own?
It's kind of convoluted because at 19, the direct sales business that I got into, they had a system that did a lot of training. Personal development, self-development, but they had audio, and back then, cassette tapes. Yeah. They had functions. It's once a month I'd go to a function and somebody who had done something. You go to seminars, ongoing training. I went to where people who had done the thing were teaching. What I really didn't like about school is I had the theoretical person. I like watching somebody who's done it. And so I was there, and I'm 19 years old, and I'm around a bunch of people who are my dad's age. But I soaked it up. I listened to probably an hour of audio per day. Again, that compounds, just like working out. So in everybody that I was listening to, I kind of got the same thing, is the way you inspire people toward a shared objective is you find out what they want. And if what they want and what you want, if you can align it and it's win-win, great. And if not, sowing and reaping, all the basic principles of success. I just heard it over and over and over again. kind of go all in when I do things. I went 7 years without a date, without partying, without anything, not a vacation, day of vacation. I just kind of dug in. And so I went from age 19 to age 26 of not doing any of the things that early 20s people do. I mean, I would take Sundays off. I mean, kind of. I go to church and then I'd read and do different stuff. And I'd be prospecting people. So I put in a bunch of hustle to try and transform myself. And, you know, I've had people, you start to pull away from your peers pretty quickly when you invest in yourself. And, you know, I didn't want to go do some road trip with them or to go to some party they're going to talk about the same thing they did last week. And pretty soon, you know, you have to respond to that. And I didn't respond to it too well. You know, it was sort of like, you know, whatever, don't be a loser. You know, and I had to learn that that wasn't the right spirit to have. And then eventually just try to get around sharper and sharper people. You become who you associate with. And I had mentors that taught me 2 things are going to matter. You're 19, what you read, who you associate with. And that helped. So these things kind of just came naturally. Eventually, when Troy and I were at, you know, the construction company, we're in the middle of Wisconsin somewhere, and it's cold, and, you know, we're leaving some guy behind on this job site because he found a girl he's going to stay there with, and it's like, oh, man. So the opportunity came up where I got fired from a company, and that gave me a chance to go say, why am I doing this? And so I went to start selling internet connectivity, and I got the job. I knew nothing about it, but the lady doing the interview was in a sorority at the school I went to. I knew nothing about the Greek system either, but she said the name of the house. I don't know what it was. And I knew one girl who was in the Greek system. Oh, how funny. And I said, do you know Holly? And she said, oh my God. And so she was the wife of one of the best wrestlers we had. He was a great dude. Oh my God. And it just happened. So we did it, and pretty, you know, I left, and my headhunter called me back, said, how'd it go? And I told him, he's like, oh no, you talked about it. Yeah, so I got hired. But then I figured it out. And people along the way, people, they may ask, can you do this? Now, if they ask, had I done it, I would say no. But if they ask, can I do it, I would say yes. Because I know I can figure it out. Yeah. And so that was really, then leadership, I could just realize I need to figure this out. I need to learn how to lead people. So it's just an evolution of not my thoughts so much, but the input I was getting.
So on the input then, because you did this, and I mean, I don't know your whole story, but I know where you are now. You're right. I mean, you are successful to where you're wanting to go, but
I live in the same town as Elon Musk.
I'll tell you,
I'm a peasant.
You're doing well. You're doing well. That. You have a beautiful family. You have kids that respect you. I mean, that's success.
It is.
And you've professionally made a lot of achievements. So in this whole line, and maybe it's like the value on the real estate, or I would call this like game changer. So if we kind of think about our story, there are all these pivotal moments. Some of them are bigger pivots than others. Is there a person that stands out to you who was the game changer to you, the person that got Wade Burgess from managing construction sites to, you know, LinkedIn or whatever the thing is? So
I think yes, more than one, but the most foundational one was actually my grandfather. That was when I was very, very young. It was a bunch of kids, so I'd be on the back of the horse with him. And the basic principles I saw there was work ethic, your word is your bond, his connection to nature. The principles of life that make you happy or sad, I watched that. And, you know, he said, if you lose money, you can replace it. If you lose a friend, you've lost something of value. If you lose your word, you've lost everything. So I watched how he interacted in his world and what he did and took risks and had fun doing it. So he was very important to me. My parents were really busy, and I love my mom and dad, but Grandpa was one level detached, and he could have that conversation. Yeah. The next one was a mentor of mine named Ron Pereira. This is when I got in this direct sales business. Now, I didn't get access to him for a couple of years. I worked and worked and worked to get his attention, and I had a chance to spend time with him, and he said, you know, if you do the right things, have a call like once a quarter. And he just told me the truth. Like, no sugarcoating. This is the way it is. And he also, you know, success. He said, if you can't look yourself in the mirror, you're not a success. If you don't love your wife more than any other woman, you're not a success. if your kids don't respect you, you're not a success. Like he just had these foundational principles that were helpful to me when you're especially that age. My wife, Andrea, was a major life changer to me because, when you have kind of a hard heart and thin skin, it's hard to get out of that mode.
Yeah.
And she taught me, I think, how to love, like for real, not because you get something from it or, because you're supposed to. She taught me, really, she knew more about sales skills than I did. And she'd get stuff done. And so it was just like, can. She, there's no can't, right? It was just like, that was, she's been really pivotal. And we chose the two become one, and we don't have a 50-50 marriage. It's 100-100, and like she created the idea of like dividing roles that you mentioned or tasks. She termed it pink jobs and blue jobs. But it's just like, I'll do this, you do that. And that just liberated me in a way that, she completed me. Didn't finish me off.
Yeah.
And I think and I found somebody to serve.
Yeah.
Who I wanted to serve. And there was long-term benefit for that. And then actually her father's been really important as well. He taught me in that business, I've always had multiple things going, and he taught me in that business we still have right now as an internet model. He taught me how to lead people at scale without spending your entire time. Like he basically taught me how to do it in a scalable way, living a life of balance. He's a great public speaker, stuff like that. And just somebody I can bounce things off that won't try to convince me to do something. That's the right questions.
That's great.
But he is an encourager. Everybody I know says Will is the greatest encourager. He believes that there are three kinds of people. There's well poisoners. There are lawn mowers. They just go home mow the lawn. That's it. Not yours, theirs.
Okay.
They're fine. They don't accomplish a lot, but they're good. And then they're life enrichers. And he believes that a life enricher has a much more joyful life. Everyone around is better, and he's that guy. So he's taught me a lot with that. So yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of people, but those are really important.
Foundational ones. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's always fun to hear.
It's great. Well, I appreciate taking the time. We should carve out more time for this.
It was fun.
Great. But yeah, and I think the connections of the mutuality we have is really great, and also the differences. That's kind of what, one of the things I think our society could use more of.
Yeah.
Like,
couldn't agree more.
Fun stuff. All right. Thanks.
I'm in.
Appreciate it.